Anthony Albanese has reiterated Australia's unwavering support for Ukraine in the wake of the fiery meeting. The Prime Minister has avoided directly mentioning Donald Trump, but said Australia stands with Ukraine as it fights a Russian authoritarian regime. Political reporter Tom Lowry joins me now from Canberra. Tom, good morning. So the PM was asked multiple times about the White House meeting. How did he respond?
Yeah, good morning, Mel. The strong suggestion from the Prime Minister was that from an Australian perspective, nothing has really changed. As you mentioned there, he was asked a number of times about this clash between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. He didn't mention Donald Trump by name at all during this press conference, but instead reiterated that Australia's support for Ukraine remains exactly as it was. He also mentioned a meeting he had with Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine a year or two ago. He argues that Ukraine's defence is really a defence of the international rule of law. That's a primary reason why Australia is standing so firmly behind Ukraine in this conflict, and he says that peace should look like a withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. That is what Australia particularly wants to see. His comments are in line with much of what you've heard there from other world leaders who have also given their support to Ukraine and offered some support as well for the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, largely in line with what we're seeing, particularly coming out of Europe. Here's a bit of what Anthony Albanese had to say at that press conference earlier this morning.
We stand with Ukraine. I've had meetings with President Zelensky on multiple occasions, including, of course, in Kyiv, in Ukraine, where I travelled very early on in my Prime Ministership. And this year, we've seen that land war in Europe go on for 3 years. The people of Ukraine are fighting not just for their own national sovereignty. They are fighting for the international rule of law. Australia has committed some $1.5 billion to help Ukraine defend itself. More than $1.3 billion of that is military support. We will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, because this is the struggle of a democratic nation versus an authoritarian regime led by Vladimir Putin, who clearly has imperialistic designs not just on Ukraine, but throughout that region.
And Tom, on a separate matter, the government is making a new pitch to beer drinkers.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tax tweak on beer and a bit of support for beer drinkers, I suppose. The excise placed on kegs of beer will be frozen at its current level for 2 years. This is essentially the federal tax that is placed on kegs of beer. It's usually lifted twice a year, so this will be frozen for the next 4, I suppose, lifts that would ordinarily come. It's going to cost the federal government around about $95 million over the next 4 years, but don't expect the price of a pint to fall substantially. This equates to about a little bit less than a cent on a pint of mid-strength beer is what's going to be saved here. So not a massive saving for beer drinkers, but it is being warmly welcomed by the beer and hospitality industries in particular. They're saying they're hopeful the government might consider cutting the excise rather than freezing it somewhere down the track. We haven't heard from the coalition as to whether they're going to match this policy as well as yet. They are still considering that, but this is something that the National Party in particular has called for in the past.